Hello and welcome to my tutorial. My name is Chris. I'll be guiding you through this particular tutorial today, and this is covering the link provided above, the setup for the Android app. I believe the article was dated back to October 27th, 2016. It's a little outdated in my opinion, so I just wanted to kind of cover some of the setup procedures that I found useful for this tutorial that would be updated. And in any event, I'd like to go ahead and get started. I'm assuming that for the prerequisites, you've got Android Studio set up on your system, and that likewise you'll have any number of dependencies already downloaded. If you don't, you can just kind of pause the tutorial at any time and wait for downloads to complete, um, and just resume it then. So I'm going to go ahead and get started here. If you've opened up Android Studio and you have an existing project, you can just select new, file new, and then new project, or at the prompts, create a new project. We'll just go ahead and name this. I'm going to go ahead and name this dev chat 3, chat app 3, and go ahead and proceed from there. And I'm going to go ahead and use the API 20 Android 4.4. You could change this, of course, to any number of different APIs, but mostly I've done this to ensure that the Firebase modules and dependencies should be working fine. I haven't tested or attempted to design um, a build of the tutorial from any previous version, API version. So in any event, I'm going to go ahead and get started here. We'll select empty activity as a default, and main activity, just click finish. And once it does that, it will create a new project for us folder. I'm going to go ahead and keep this other application open also for our reference in the tutorial, but I'll go through the steps here. Okay, so once the project is loaded, you should have something like this. It has Gradle scripts. It will be important to access this build Gradle module file right here. This helps us to define dependencies that need to be compiled into the Android application, whether it's implementation or compiled dependencies. We can go ahead and add those in, and in fact, uh, it looks like Firebase, when you go through the setup using the Firebase tool, it'll do most of the dependencies additions, but in some cases, I've had to add manually some configurations, to get things up and running. The other thing is that we'll need to go into app, and um, we'll go into the main activity. That's the default empty activity that's loaded. Usually it's like a hello world when you start or instance a new Android app. So we'll also need to access that. There were some additional configurations that I needed to provide, and namely importing a drawable. Unfortunately, the tutorial, it had, I believe, some sort of referencing, but I was not able to access it. Whatever drawable drawable that existed in the app that was not available when I, uh, copied the activity like XML. So we would need to change those around. Um, So there were some things that appeared to be missing in the tutorial that again I've had to go work around. So we'll go ahead and get started by pulling up the Firebase Assistant with the development project open. And with that, we'll just go to Tools and then Firebase. And hopefully in just a few seconds here that should populate, which it does. And we'll need to go ahead and integrate the analytics tool first. So we go ahead and push more info here under analytics. And oops. This will go ahead and okay, and then we'll go ahead and click on log an analytic event. Then we'll click connect to Firebase, and that should give us a dialog. And we'll need to create a new Firebase project. So we'll click connect, and it will start to go through the rounds of creating the project, Firebase project. This is assuming that you do have, by the way, a Firebase account set up through Android. So if you don't have that, you will need to get that set up. And I'm here at the firebase.google.com. You can go to console if you aren't already signed in. You'll need to create a Google Firebase account if you haven't already done so. And once you've done that, then it should go ahead and show like any of your recent projects that are set up. And that includes the project that you've linked via Android Studio. So for instance, my project's showing up at DB Chat App 3. Android Studio will also confirm that your app, once you've gone through the connecting your app to Firebase, it'll give an indicator that says it's connected. Once we do that, we still need to add the dependencies for the analytics into the app. So you'll need to add that, and you can do so by clicking accept changes, and it will apply these to your module, both the module and project level build Gradle files. So just go ahead and accept the changes. It'll make those updates. Then it will give a confirmation that the analytics, the dependencies are set up correctly. I'm going to go ahead and forgo the logging of events in this, but if you are interested in that, the helper, the tool, does provide information on how to do logging, event logging, so that your Firebase account will do analytic tracking of events as you log them, however you decide to use that. And again, there are instructions there provided in the assistant. I'm going to go ahead and go back to, and we're going to add next authentication, user authentication, as mentioned in the tutorial. As given in the tutorial, it looks like handle user authentication. This allows us to ensure that any user that's logged into the app can read and post messages, but non-registered users are unable to do so. Mostly this is, as stated in the app, a good idea because otherwise, anonymously posting messages might lead to other issues that could be problematic there. So What we'll need to do is go to the Firebase console and go to the application. I'm going to go ahead and pull that up here. And then just go ahead and enable authentication. Go to the authentication tab, and we'll need to set up a sign up method. And we're going to enable email passwords. So once we do that, we click enable. It says allows user to sign in with their email address and password. Our SDKs will provide email address verification, password recovery, and email address change primitives. So they'll help handle all the authentication procedure, and in case they need to change their password, the SDK also provides that. So I'm going to go ahead and click save, and once I've done that, you should have a confirmation on the site that says email password enabled. And so once we've done that, then we can go to authentication here. Oops, I'm going to go ahead and minimize that. We'll click it again. It says your app's connected to Firebase, so we don't need to worry about that. But we do need to add Firebase authentication to the app. So this will make configuration changes to the app to ensure that we're able to do that. And I'm going to go ahead and click the build or update so that it will resolve those dependencies. Now, I believe this is a critical point here. It may be the case that when you go to build the app, for instance, and I'm going to go ahead and attempt to run it just to confirm that there could be a possible issue. And I've already set up deployment target, by the way. So if you have to download and configure your virtual device, if you don't have an Android device to connect to for build testing, you'll need to do that. And again, you can just pause the tutorial to get that all set up and configured on some desktop, laptop, or whatever system that you happen to be working with Android Studio. You may have to go into your BIOS to configure that properly so that it will accept or allow for virtual devices. So that's something else to keep in mind. It kind of goes outside of the scope of this tutorial, but I'll leave it up to you to figure all that out. Okay, I didn't see anything at the moment, so it appears like the app does run, but I haven't fully made use of the libraries for the app yet. So I'm going to go ahead and start integrating um, some things here and from the tutorial, and we'll go ahead and go from there with the authentication. So just scrolling down a bit here, it says we'll need to go ahead and put on the main activity on the on create. We'll need to go ahead and insert this code. So this is where the authentication comes in, or making use of it comes into play. So we'll go ahead and insert it right here. Now you're going to get a number of red stuff coming up, and as you know, probably if you've dealt with Android, the simple Alt-Enter will start getting all the dependencies imported. And let's see here. Okay, so what we're going to do is go ahead and change one thing here, and actually a couple of things on the main activity Java. There was, I believe, originally a request code. It was a parameter that was provided technically in the tutorial that wasn't really specified any particular file, but you can put just type in one, just erase whatever the default value that was there, which is I believe it's shown in as sign in request code. That that particular parameter is just one, so you can just put in one for now. And the other thing is you'll need to import this statement, import com.firebase.ui.auth.authui, shown there, highlighted. But before you or after you do that, you'll also need to make sure that your module dependencies are properly added in as well. So in addition to doing the Firebase authentication procedure that you did at setting up the dependencies, you'll need to add this dependency right here, implementation, and then in parentheses it's com.google.android.gms play services 11.0.4. That does need to match the implementation, the Firebase implementation above, the same version 11.0.4. If they are mismatched, it can cause compilation errors and the app will crash, or that's what I've experienced. The other thing is you'll need to also import these dependencies. That's indicated on the tutorial. Make sure you go ahead and copy that from the tutorial site and put that in the build Gradle. And once you've done that, then you'll need to click on tools and then go to Android and then sync project with Gradle files. And after a bit, it should synchronize all of the compile and implementations, the dependencies implementations into the project. And so you shouldn't have any build errors going forward. So once you've done that, then you should get a successful build, and with the successful build, you should have something like, and I'm going to go ahead and run it here in a second. May take just a bit here to get it going. You should have something like this shown. So in the end, the simulator, it'll show sign in with email, and you'll go ahead and do the sign in. Now, I did disable the display chat messages function only because I haven't added it into the class, the main activity class as of yet. But I'll go ahead and get that added as well, and we can go ahead and proceed from there. I kind of skipped through to the handle user authentication section first, mostly because setting the layout up did have a little bit of reworking to do from the main activity, and in fact, I'm going to go ahead and copy and paste that here in just a bit. Okay, so the one thing that you'll need to trace in this, there are several parameters that are provided, but again, we don't have really the source files, I think, listed in the tutorial. At least I didn't see any, so some things I did have to kind of source and trace on my own. If you do a Google search on this IC Send Black 24dp, it should pull up an image. And in fact, I'll just go to my downloads really quick, and looks like we should be able to find that. I don't have it shown here. Oh, there it is right there. IC Send Black 24dp. So we'll have to import that into the Android project. just go ahead and, whoops, right click to make a drawable, a new image asset, and we can change that to action bar tab icons, and then click image, and then go to the path where it's at, and let's see, downloads. Yep, so we just click on it like that, and it should import it. Click next, click finish, and then it's imported. That way it'll find the drawable, and let's see if we can go ahead and run that. Okay, so the one thing I did find in the tutorial is that using this relative layout in conjunction with this Android support design widget floating action button. I had issues with the floating action button. I don't know that it's altogether necessary. That I think was probably chosen by the author for the the look of the design aesthetic, but for this tutorial, I was kind of more concerned about having something that's functional as opposed to something that looks nicer at the moment. So for now, I will just go ahead and suggest that you can go to my address if you need to make a copy of the activity, the main activity, and just copy that and paste that into your Android Studio. I've gone ahead and made it more or less configurable so that you don't have to do kind of any additional work to kind of get things set up and going. So I'm going to go ahead and paste that in here, and what we should have, hopefully, is something that runs. Okay, and we're back to the screen here. I'm going to go ahead and sign in real quick. Just create a user ID. Looks like this access not configured. Okay, so for the user authentication, we'll need to also make sure to add in the main activity also an override to the on activity result and add that in. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. Just going to make sure I import all the modules. I'm going to change this. And looks like everything else should be ready to go. So I'm going to go ahead and run this again. Again, I got this section of code on activity result that is under this section, the step 1 handle user sign in from the tutorial. So we'll just need to make sure to get that added in. Okay, so once we have that code added, I'm going to go ahead and try to log in here real quick. And okay. Okay, so at the link, I'm just going to go here. There was an error message. It stated error fetching providers for email. If you see this, this is under the Run tab, the Runtime tab. you'll need to access the Google Identity Toolkit API, and you can just click on that link. The process is all automated. It'll pop up in your browser, and it'll give you an option to enable the API, the Toolkit API authentication API. Just go ahead and select that. Once you've done that successfully, um, it should look like something like this: API and Services Identity Toolkit. So once you've done that, then you should be able to create an account for a given username. So I'm going to just go ahead and put my name in there, and oops, we'll go ahead and click enter, save that, and then it'll sign us up. Once it signs up, then we should have our input. Oops, but we did get the app stopping. Okay, so the error that occurred, or the app closed, that was because I assigned a listener uh, a call, a send message function, but I haven't actually created it yet in the activity main yet. So that's just something to be aware of. We'll get that configured in a bit. In the meantime, I'd like to go to step 2 of the tutorial, which is handle user sign out. And to do that, we'll need to create a menu resource file called main menu XML. And what I'll do is actually, this is kind of like a case of reverse engineering. I'll go ahead and add the override on create options menu in the main activity. And the reason for doing this is that it will give us an option to auto-populate the actual XML file. So I put in the override method. It says can't resolve it, so I'm going to click on that, hit Alt Enter, and then I'm going to click on this part where, since it can't find the actual main menu, we'll create the resource file. Just left click on that and just click OK, and then it creates the resource file. So we can go ahead and copy, after we have that, we'll just copy what's inside of the menu in the XML. And we'll paste that, and that should create the menu item. So now what we need to do is, when that option is selected, that menu option is selected, we'll create an override method that goes ahead and signs out the user, actually closes the app too, if they choose to sign out. So let's go back to the main activity. We'll just add the override up here, and we'll need to go ahead and fix all of this. Okay, so I've just gone ahead and imported everything that we needed for that, and let's go ahead and confirm that this should, oh, and before I run that, let me make sure. Okay, yeah, it looks like we've got everything there. So I'll go ahead and click OK. Okay, so also on the main menu, the XML file, you'll actually want to copy it as given from the tutorial. So just copy and paste that into the development, so wherever wherever you have the main menu XML, that will need to be copied and pasted. Unfortunately, when I copied the menu, it had a bad prefix, so it looks like we need to kind of preserve the prefixing the way that it was structured. So once you've run that, it should sign you automatically out of the app. We can confirm this. I'm just going to go ahead and run it from, oops, wrong app. Let me see. We'll run it again. Okay, so I signed out, tested it, and signed out of the app, but I'll go ahead and do it again just to demonstrate it. And put in our password. Okay, so we've signed in successfully, gives us a confirmation. Otherwise, we're going to go ahead and sign out, and it says you've been signed out. So lo and behold, it's kind of done the work for us. So I'm going to go ahead and sign out of that one too. Let's go ahead and go to the next step. Since we've managed to create our sign out, now we'll need to create the model. That's step 5. It's not too difficult. You just want to go ahead and copy this class, this particular class, and we'll need to create the class in Android, our project. So we'll go ahead and do that in the same area. And we'll, oops, we need a new, let me see if I can go back here. I want to right click, click new, Java class. We'll name this according to the tutorial chat message.java. There's no interfaces, this will be public. So once we've created that, copy this. Make sure we've got everything. Okay, it looks like we do. So that creates chat message. It looks like we may have one particular import that needs to be resolved. Go ahead and get that imported. So Java util date. And we'll need to be able to post the message. Now, I've actually created an alternate method since we're just using a button to do this. So in this case, the alternate method that I've used is given, and that you can find, by the way, at my site. And I'm just going to go through the navigation really quickly here. Okay, you can find it at the above link. It's under my main activity. But this is the link right here. And we'll just go ahead and copy this method, public voids and messages. So we just need to copy that. It's a little bit simpler than the actual tutorial. It's a little more straightforward. And so I'm going to go ahead and paste that in. A few things that are not showing up, so we'll need to make sure the imports are managed here. We'll need to make sure to manage view. Okay, and Firebase database. Now this is the other thing we'll need to configure, which we haven't done as of yet. So we'll need to go back to the assistant. and go back to Firebase, and we'll need to go to real-time database and click send and retrieve, and we'll need to add that to the app, the dependencies. So it'll go ahead through the configurations of that, setting that up in the project. And once that's completed, it will show dependencies set up correctly. And we should now be able to import this successfully just by hitting Alt Enter, and lo and behold, that's set up. So I'm going to go ahead and run this again just to confirm that we have a message pushed up to the server, the Firebase server. Okay, signing into the app now. We're going to go ahead and okay, it looks like it can't find something, so we'll need to get that resolved here in a bit. Okay, we'll go ahead and test this again. Let's just import need to be taken care of. Okay, so it looks like it pushed it. Can kind of confirm. So it should be a confirmation that this nonetheless went up. But we can also check the server direct. And we'll go to database. And it looks like we've got a message, and there's our test message. So that did go through. So that is successful. So then we'll go to the next part of the tutorial, which is to display the chat messages. So to do this, you'll notice we'll have a list view, and with Android, when you want to populate lists, you'll have to have what's called a list adapter. Fortunately, Firebase UI has a very handy class that specifically adapts Firebase messages for the list adapter. It's called Firebase List Adapter, which reduces much of the work, makes it quite easy to adapt. So we'll go ahead and add this object variable to the class, the main activity class. So we'll need to go back to that. I'm going to go ahead and make sure we pulled that all the way up. I'm going to go all the way to the top and just add this as a class variable or class object. And you'll notice we'll get a red can't resolve symbol. Again, Alt, Enter. We'll need to import that class. We'll also need to make sure that the chat messages is imported. So I believe, well, maybe not. In any event, that looks like that's set up. So once we have that, then we'll just go ahead and copy this list, this particular that goes in the display chat messages method. Now, technically, we haven't created it. I went and at the point where we were supposed to have had that method called, I went and commented it out so that it wasn't calling a null method, one that didn't exist in the first place. So we need to make sure that we get that chat method inputted. So I'm going to go ahead and add it to as a class method to the main activity. So we'll just go ahead and add it right here. Copy and paste that display chat messages. And then back in the tutorial, I'm going to scroll back down, and we'll need to grab and apply this in the display in this area. So I'm going to go ahead and add that. Now we've got probably a bunch of red showing up, so we want to make sure to resolve all of this. So I'm just doing the usual Okay, we should have already a message XML. For some reason, it's not seeing it in the layout, or maybe I don't have it. I don't think I've added it. So I'm going to go ahead and add it. Oops. Let's see. Yep, so we'll need to create the layout message. I don't know, and we'll need to also, that's yet another thing that we need to make sure to get inputted. So going back up, it's a relative layout. We add the resource method, so we need to make sure that this is put in as a relative layout. Okay, and once we've done that, we can just copy this bit of code. I'm going to just copy it as it's, oops, wrong one. For some reason, I didn't get it. Okay, so once that's copied, then we'll go back to the main activity where we last left off, and so now no more red there, it's showing up. Okay, and it looks like everything else, I don't see any more red, so we should be good. It looks like everything else is good to go. Now, to make sure that the messages are listed, I've went and commented it out here, the display chat messages, so we'll need to re-enable it if you've done so in the tutorial, your version. Just make sure you re-enable the display. And, oh, right there. So let's go ahead and run it, see what happens. Okay, so running the application it will produce the, or should produce the app that we see here in the simulator. It's populated the test messages. When I go to create a new test message, in fact, I'll go ahead and do that really quickly here. And we'll hit the button. It goes and populates the message. That's pulling the data from the Firebase server. And so it looks like that completes the application work. That completes this tutorial, what I wanted to cover, and thank you for listening in.